Welcome to Bike Life Radio from KWNK 97.7 FM, Reno Bike Project, and bikewashoe.org in Reno, Nevada. We ride our bikes out into the world with a recorder, and we talk to people about their bikes and their lives. I'm Kai Plascon. Right on. Today, we're taking a trip to the National Bike Summit in Washington, D.C., and we talked to the District Department of Transportation about how they capitalized on 3 visits from international experts, the Dutch Cycling Embassy. Then we have a breakdown of how Reno is having an incredibly difficult time installing just one protected bike path from the university to Midtown. Finally, we're going to talk to Mike McMillan of the Reno Public Market, who had the brilliant idea of bringing bike groups together for Art Town. It's called Biketopia. Before we get to that, bike news. In international bike news, a new bike shop in Uganda is getting some help from Jackson Hole, Wyoming church. It's the latest effort by Abercrombie and Kent Philanthropy, which has started women-owned bike shops in Tanzania, Botswana, Jordan, and 2 in Zambia. Each of the shops start with used bikes donated from the United States. Have you heard of World Bicycle Day? Well, it's April 19th. I know it's past, but according to an article in Forbes, it's pretty interesting. Bicycle Day celebrates the discovery of LSD by a Swiss guy, Albert Hofmann. Bicycle Day represents the idea of a day when the whole world can jump on a literal and figurative bicycle and take a trip, a proverbial trip. Don't ride a bike on LSD, but it's safer to ride a bike on LSD than to drive a car. In national bike news, the Oregon Department of Transportation is taking the state's notoriety for being bike-friendly to the next level. The state is working to help bring bike groups together across the state because they share the same goals and they can share resources too. Speaking of Oregon, people in Portland are worried that bike corkers could be labeled as domestic terrorists. Bike corkers are people who stop traffic so that cyclists can go by. A bill in the Oregon House could consider stopping traffic with your bike a paramilitary activity. We hear a lot about charging stations for electric cars these days, right? Well, now New York City is considering a free electric bike charging station. The idea is to help food delivery services reduce traffic congestion and alleviate parking problems. Speaking of electric bikes, Washington State might become the 8th state in the nation to approve rebates for e-bikes. How much are they going to spend? $7 million. And they are creating a lending library for e-bikes. Buyers will get a $300 point of sale rebate. You're listening to KWNK 97.7 FM in local bike news from Bike Life Radio and bikewashoe.org. The Keystone Bridge is falling apart. It leads to Reno High School in Old Southwest and Idlewild Park. Concrete is dropping into the street and the river. The state says that the bridge is still safe, though. The plan is to replace the bridge around 2027 and install a bike network in this mini spaghetti bowl of streets in the area. It's Bike Month, and there's a ton to do and a ton of free stuff if you just get on your bike, from free pancakes to gift cards and free drinks. The Washoe County Health District has a new Bike Month website. It's gethealthywashoe.com. All the goodies are listed there. If you have a bike event, you can contact the health district, and they will help promote it on the website. Among the events that are happening during Bike Month, the Truckee Meadows Bicycle Alliance is offering presentations every Thursday in May at 6 p.m. at Craft in Midtown. The first 20 people who ride their bike to watch an event will get a free drink. The City of Reno and Regional Transportation Commission are making a bike network plan for downtown. The bad news is that they are lacking north-south connections and missing Sierra, which is recommended in a traffic study to protect people. Also, city staff continue to make false statements about two-way protected bike paths, calling them incredibly dangerous, despite their safe use around the world. City staff are trying to exclude University Way from the bike network because they want to keep it for high-speed, high-volume traffic, despite studies saying students need protection on University Way, and traffic studies show a bike path on University Way won't impact traffic. A complete breakdown of the controversy is available on Bike Life Radio on KWNK's Spotify. People who want to tell the city to finish University Way or want to raise any kind of bike issue with local leaders, they can use the website buildabetterbikenetwork.com. The Reno Gazette-Journal finished an investigation into why the University Way protected bike path for students came to a halt. The review of more than 1,500 documents showed the stoppage happened when the Regional Transportation Commission hired a manager to focus more on politics, and the row casinos sent a letter to stop the student safety project and asked to move it to Virginia Street in front of their casino. Top engineering staff at RTC have since quit over this, citing a general lack of transparency, mixed messages to the public, and confusion. That's it for bike news from bikewashoe.org. A reminder that Bike Life Radio airs on the first Sunday of every month at noon, right here on KWNK 97.7 FM. Today on Bike Life Radio, like Reno, Washington, D.C. brought the Dutch Cycling Embassy, except they brought the Dutch Cycling Embassy 3 times to their city over the past 6 years. D.C. has capitalized on that visit, installing 2-way protected bike lanes citywide in the major tourist destination. Reno is having incredible difficulty installing just one protected 2-way path on University Way for student safety. So the Truckee Meadows Bicycle Alliance took a trip to D.C. to see what they're doing right. We saw it firsthand on a bike tour with the Dutch Cycling Embassy and the Department of Transportation there. Bike planner Will Hansfield took us on the tour. We're going to look at some things that from when the Dutch Cycling Embassy was here previously and how they applied some of these concepts. Are you going to be addressing the group here and explaining it?
Yeah, I'm actually going to start picking up my my megaphone and talking about it now that we're on the facilities we're trying to look at. So, all right, thanks everyone for getting around the parked buses and other kind of traffic things. This is the first facility that we're going to look at that was part of the 2016 Think Bike Workshop. This is the Virginia Avenue cycle track. It's a protected center running and partially side running 2-way bike facility. Virginia Avenue, when we first started working on it back in 2005, we designated it as a bicycle route, but didn't have any dedicated infrastructure on it. Meanwhile, it was carrying about 12,000 cars a day in 6 lanes, which is, you know, you can do 12,000 cars a day in like 2 lanes in a center turn pocket. So it had more capacity for the vehicle space than it needed. We were able to take some of that away and turn that into a bike facility. Here we go.
University Way in Reno has the same situation. According to a traffic study completed in 2021, there is way more space than is needed on that street. Instead of putting in a protected path for student safety, the city is using the extra space for dumpsters and free parking. So you can see our priorities are not quite where they need to be for safety.
One thing that's remarkable about this facility is it connects to one of our bridges, the Teddy Roosevelt Bridge that crosses to Virginia. I'll call it out when we pass it, but and it connects to 2 other protected bike facilities, and it also connects to our regional trail network.
The Reno city engineer and city manager oppose a similar cycle track in Reno because they say it would cross the freeway.
This is the first intersection with another protected bike facility. This is our 21st Street protected bike lanes, also a 2-way cycle track. And one thing worth noting, this does connect to the Teddy Roosevelt Bridge that leads to Virginia. So it's one of the key pieces in our regional cycling network. So we do have a lot of cyclists from Virginia coming in for work, for tourism, for other reasons.
I noticed that you had kind of like a bike turn lane there,
yeah.
Like a green one.
I'm going to stop here.
It was almost like a bike box for bikes.
Yeah, we do. They're called 2-stage turn queue boxes.
Another challenge in Reno is figuring out signal timing. DC has figured it out too. Bikes go first, then cars.
It really works. It's hard to explain verbally because it works with like a signal timing pattern, but we put the cyclist in kind of an eddy in the traffic flow where they can wait until the next signal turns green and then they change direction and go the opposite street. Those are places where it's safe to wait and execute a left turn or right turn or something like that. We've been putting them into more of our projects.
I see that you've got, we kept the median here and just put the bikes on either side of the median.
Yeah, in different parts we had to work around existing built infrastructure. And there's also, you can see the road cut right there. So our water utility is doing a water pipe project there. And so they had to take all the barriers that we had in place out. They'll put them back when they're all done with this project. But it's one of the things we work around with just the ongoing amount of street work and maintenance, just making sure that we use products that any of the consultants that or the contractors that work in public space can get and use. So this was an interesting choice. We had to either go through this tunnel or above on the service lanes. And we just go through the tunnel. It's more contiguous for cyclists and has fewer conflicts. And it's really fun.
When the streets have extra space, it's easy to dedicate space to cycling because it doesn't impact drivers. Simple. And that's the case on University Way. Still, the city engineer and city manager oppose it. So you said you had extra capacity on the road, or?
Yeah, what that means is there's not as many cars as we have, lane capacity, right? We had 6 lanes before, and really we only needed more like, there's basically 4. Some sections have 5 lanes now, but that's plenty for what kind of traffic is on this corridor. So it makes it just a little easier for us. Sometimes we'll take some space away from cars, knowing that there is some usually minor effect on their overall ability to go through the network of traffic network easily or quickly. So a lot of hard choices when you work in this space, but we think we got it right on this one. We're gonna wait right here.
He says that Henderson, Nevada is going the opposite direction.
The library I used to go to, Green Valley Library in Henderson, Nevada, I happened to look at it, and it used to have like 4 lanes next to it. I think it was Green Valley Parkway, and they've since expanded to like 7 or 8 lanes of traffic. The grass area we used to play on when I was a kid is like, it's like a roadway now, and there was like a sculpture we used to play on. It's like 5 feet from the sidewalk, so it's a little bit disappointing to see them like leaning into more space for cars. I really just don't think that's gonna net them any like civic value. We're just gonna circle up on the grass up here so we can collect everybody, number one, but also just debrief a little bit, talk about what we saw.
Civic value. All right, we're in D.C. You're listening to KWNK 97.7 FM, Bike Life Radio.
But we really started focusing on protected bikeways in about 2020. We got a challenge from our local advocacy group, WABA. I think you've probably heard about them by now. But WABA's great, and they challenged us to do 20 miles of protected bike lanes in 1 year. And we said, well, how about 20 miles in 3 years? Because just the pace from going from like 1 or 2 miles to 20 in a year was a bit much. But we actually got that goal. And so their challenge actually forced us to kind of go back to look at some of the older plans and say, what could we conceivably do? What's feasible to really get built in the next 3 years, and this was one of those projects.
Before deciding on a configuration of a 2-way cycle track, Washington, D.C. also studied a lot of different scenarios. The studies for the University Way cycle track also did the same thing.
So we're talking about the why center running versus side running, and we actually did concept plans for every possible. We had a protected bike lane on each side version. We had a cycle track on either side version, and we had a center running for the whole way version. And we ended up with like kind of a combined, side running and center running for a couple of reasons.
But to be fair, 2-way cycle tracks aren't the best solution, according to Dick Van Veen of the Dutch Cycling Embassy, who also did the Reno workshop. But they are quick and easy for communities like ours that are struggling to install anything for cyclists.
As long as you're on it, it's okay, but to get on and get off, that's the hardest part. So I would always advise to go for unidirectional behind the curb, behind the tree line even. And if the sidewalk's too narrow, just double the sidewalk and put a new curb in. That's basically the idea. But I know it's more costly and it's a major operation. So for the time being, to get the amount of cyclists there to.
So the question is, how hard would it be to retrofit a facility like this? And how we implemented this one was what we would call with tactical materials. So materials that we essentially bolt on to the surface of the roadway. We don't really change the curb and gutter. Probably the biggest cost involved is redoing drainage and redoing the crown of the road if you're going to expand from the curb out. and really redo the curb line. So we've done it before, and we actually have a project in Northeast. So curbs slope down at about 2% grade, and then roadway crowns also slope down at 3 or 4% grade. And if you keep extending the curb towards the road, you'll end up with like a 3-inch curb or 2-inch curb. So you have to recrown the road and reset every manhole cover and things like that. So it is. I don't disagree with Dick in general. It's just where we come into like making the cost work and making, convincing our political leaders like that we can make more space for cyclists. Like we have to start at sort of like the lower cost end of the spectrum, and then as we're proving ourselves, we're investing more heavily in the full scale streetscape redos that do change all the curb and gutter and manholes and all the things that are costly. So we'll have a couple more examples that we can talk about. We're going to ride. Well, it's going to be there's a couple bi-directional cycle tracks. They're on the side of the road, though. So we're going to ride G Street next, and 21st and then 20th Street, I think.
And Hansen says there is another important lesson that they learned along the way.
Our first bicycle master plan was in 2005, and we've been hard at work on putting in bike facilities since then, which is a little bit ahead of most American cities. But we've learned a lot, and we're undoing some of the things we did in the past. We don't do a lot of regular bike lanes anymore, the unprotected kind. We're really focused on protected bike lanes for the most part. We don't get it right in every situation, but we're doing better and better as time goes on. We're going to turn right into this facility, but we're going to let the cars go first.
Meanwhile, Reno Sparks continues to make the mistake of installing painted bike lanes. What is the result of more protected bike paths in D.C.? Well, Hansen says their bike counts show more women are riding daily now. When they started with just painted bike lanes, only 25% of riders were women. Now, 45% of daily bike riders are women, nearly double. We're going to hear more about our visit to D.C. and what we learned in next month's Bike Life Radio. What about money-wise? Does D.C. have a lot more money than other cities, or what do you think?
Like one interstate interchange can cost, $500 million to $1 billion. Just one interchange. And you can see, like, how does it cost them? It's like, just count up all the steel girders and all the concrete and all the, the earth moving that goes into one of those one interchange. And our entire bike network, we haven't spent, all told, we probably haven't spent $50 million on it yet, and it's after 15 years of work at far lower cost than like almost any roadway project.
So let's get back to the idea of how we can apply these lessons in Reno. Here they are really quickly. It's easy to install protected bike paths on streets that have lots of space, like University Way, Center Street, because there's less political opposition and less opposition from drivers. Use movable things to create these protected paths, things that you can bolt into the street so that they can easily be taken out. It's also important to do these protected paths to slow down the high-speed traffic on streets that are too wide. Another lesson, two-way cycle tracks work, and they can cross freeways. Finally, more women will ride if we make biking safer. When we come back, we're going to talk about how just a few people inside local government have blocked the will of the Reno City Council and Regional Transportation Commission to stop a protected bike path for student safety in our community. You're listening to KWNK 97.7 FM, Bike Life Radio. Meet a victim of infrastructure injustice.
That's right. My name's Kevin.
Kevin wanted to ride his bike from UNR through downtown to Midtown.
That's right.
But there are no bike lanes through downtown Reno. Kevin tried to ride his bike anyway. He chose Center Street.
Yeah, going the opposite way, because that's all downhill and you can go real fast.
Without bike paths, streets are dangerous. He found out the hard way.
Someone put an island right there where it don't belong. I hit that sucker going head on, and I went like 40 feet. I could get out of bed for 2 weeks.
It's time to stand up for the victims of infrastructure injustice like Kevin. People on bikes, scooters, and motorized wheelchairs deserve safe streets too. Go to buildabetterbikeNetwork.com and end infrastructure injustice. Kevin will thank you.
That's right.
We're back. We've been talking about how easily and successfully Washington, D.C. has installed protected bike paths. These safety projects have increased ridership among women from 25% to 45% in that city. One of the neat things about Reno is that there is political will to install protected bike paths, like one on University Way, also known as Center Street. The protected path is called a cycle track. The City Council and Regional Transportation Commission both voted to move forward with it in January of 2019. This would be a game changer for Reno and show that we can do what other communities are doing successfully. The Regional Transportation Commission spent more than $400,000 in taxpayer money on studies developing this protected path in town, and it was supposed to be done in spring of last year. So what happened? Just as final design plans were about to get underway in 2020, the Row Casino sent a letter to the Regional Transportation Commission saying they want the path in front of their casino on Virginia Street instead of University Way. So Reno City Manager Doug Thornley, City Engineer Kerry Koski, and Regional Transportation Commission Executive Director Bill Thomas blocked the University Way path, even though Council and Commission voted for it. They have kept the downtown safety project from moving forward ever since. They are effectively preventing the council, RTC, and public from even considering the project anymore. As you can imagine, some people who voted for it on the city council are not happy, and it resulted in an intense debate on April 12th at the Reno City Council meeting. Council members want to continue with the University Way project, but City Engineer Kerry Koski wants a protected path on Virginia Street instead. That could take years to install. Council members had a variety of interesting opinions about why bike paths can be on both Virginia and University Way to improve all of downtown safety, not just on one street. As you can imagine, these meetings are incredibly long and not very interesting in a lot of parts, so I just took out the parts where they're talking about bike paths for you. Let's get started with Reno Mayor Hillary Sheeby.
The one place where I do have heartburn, and I think we need to get the cycle track back on track. I have said this. I still don't see something compelling enough to me not to have it on Center Street and then do all the other placemaking down Virginia. I have come to Eric with the cycle track to me, and I've said this. You guys know this. I've said this out loud, how I support the cycle track. I like that it's on University. I think we got to continue to keep bicycling safe, especially for our university students. And then maybe, I think we look at other car options for parking downtown, like we've talked about. There's a lot of loading zones and other areas that have been marked that I don't think that need to be marked. I mean, I see it all the time, right? So I do think there's other options for parking. But we've looked at this cycle track for far too long. I wanted to get going on it. That's just me, how I feel about it. It's 30% engineered. I haven't seen anything compelling enough to me that we shouldn't do it. And I think this is just me versus Virginia Street. I love Virginia Street, but I also think there's a way to sort of encompass it all together. We have a tremendous opportunity. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. We've been saying this for far too long. And by the way, visitors, it needs to be safe downtown, clean downtown. DRP is doing a really good job. Proud of all the work that's happening, but also where's the cycling team? Want to make sure RPD is down there on foot and on, cycling. So there's a constant presence. People need to feel safe. Far too long, people don't want to go downtown. I'm sorry, they don't. And that's really just, disheartening because we've all wanted to see it thrive for so long. So let's just go. It's time to move on. Anyway, thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm beating a dead horse.
Yeah.
Okay, Councilwoman Ebert, go ahead. It's all you.
Overall, I think this is a great idea. We absolutely need to do stuff downtown, but I have concerns about the bike lanes on Virginia Street. Also, I don't understand why we can't do it on Center Street. So looking through the staff report, I saw that a statement in here about having clear bike lanes. Am I understanding correctly that we'll have a bike lane, a bus lane, and a car lane all kind of trying to squeeze into one spot on Virginia Street and parking? So I'm very concerned about adding these bike lanes in and taking out the turn pockets. Are we, is there a way that we can go back to putting the bike lanes on Center Street?
Amy Pennington of the city responded. One of the problems with the placemaking study is that the city engineer crafted the study to laser focus only on Virginia Street.
So what we're presenting here today doesn't actually have anything to do with bike lanes being on Center Street or not. This is just a recommendation for Virginia Street. When Gail was working with the community, what we heard was that people want to see multiple modes of transportation on Virginia Street so they can access the businesses and do all these things. We have lots of university students who don't use vehicles. We have lots of residents who are moving into downtown. We have a ton of residential units that are about to come online, and those people would likely not use a car to travel a block or two to go somewhere. So making Virginia Street more of a destination where people can use multiple modes of transportation on the street is actually something that can help businesses, not hurt them.
Councilman Miguel Martinez was also wondering about a protected bike path on University Way and Center Street and why it isn't moving forward.
Being newer on the council, I have just become aware of some of the Center Street stuff. So I don't know if you or anyone else on the staff can address what happened there. I have been getting emails from constituents about that. And I know you mentioned that the Center Street bike path isn't necessarily what we're discussing today, but given the fact that we are adding those bike lanes on Virginia Street, I thought it might be prudent for us to address some of those concerns that we've been hearing from our constituents.
Carrie Koski can provide an answer.
Thank you for the question. Carrie Koski, your Director of Public Works, City Engineer. So I'd gladly give you a little bit of brief information about the Center Street cycle track. With all due respect, I want to address what the mayor had said as well. So some of the current, and you all may have remember this, we pushed the pause button because I had safety concerns. And basically, when I say safety concerns, what I mean is when you put two-directional cycle track on a one-way street, you have to feel safe as a cyclist while you're trying to get onto that street or off of that street. One of the things that we found in the pilot project was that it is very difficult for a driver when you are conditioned to go one direction. If somebody is coming a different direction on that street and it's not a signalized intersection, say it's just an open intersection, people get confused about safety, who has the right of way. And to me, that is a major concern. So you've got a contraflow running on a one-way street. How does that interact with your side streets?
The solution to this issue, according to what we learned in Washington, D.C., is to use traffic signals, lights telling people when to go. Simple. Carrie Koski said a freeway on-ramp is a problem too, but she didn't say why.
The other big concern I have is at the freeway. We have a lot of vehicles at the freeway. We have an on-ramp on the University Way, on the freeway, on University Way and I-80. That to me is a potential for a disaster when you're putting cyclists through that intersection. Now you're going to say, well, you've got large intersections at Virginia Street. Yes, you do, but you don't have a freeway on-ramp. We have a lot of crashes in that particular area. Parking. Businesses are going to lose 80 parking spots. To me, in Midtown, that is a huge deal. That is a huge, huge issue for our businesses. It's kind of contradictory of what we're talking about.
She said businesses would lose 80 parking spots, which is false and an exaggeration. According to the 2021 RTC traffic analysis, 75 parking spots would be lost, and half of those aren't even used. The analysis said the parking spots that are being used can move to side streets, and metered parking can be installed so that people aren't just using free parking all day long.
Loading zones, we talked about losing the loading zones for the Pioneer Center. What do we do there? The Reno Ballroom. How do we continue with our special events? That is a concern of mine.
Despite what the city says about the Pioneer Center, the city has not spoken to the Pioneer Center about their loading zones and how they might be impacted. The city has managed to install loading zones successfully on the 5th Street protected bike path, So why can't it do the same thing with University Way Center Street protected path?
And then also, the elimination of one of the lanes on a major couplet. So we've got a one-way couplet into Reno that brings people into downtown off of the freeway, and then you've got one that goes out, right? So you're going to reduce one of those lanes on University. So those were the major items that I have concerns.
Carrie Koski said there is a lane reduction, but failed to mention that the road has more than enough space for the amount of cars that travel on it currently. Here's Councilwoman Jenny Breckus, and she's trying to make the point that there is too much traffic and plenty of room on University Way, and so a two-way cycle track is appropriate for University Way.
And I respect Ms. Koski a lot, but I think she's off. I think she's off in saying, well, I have concerns about having these two couplets, and one way in. And I've made this point before, is the starting point, in my view, for discussion about the public right-of-ways downtown is you can't have it both ways. You can't have high volume, one-way couplets, freeway access, and a pedestrian downtown environment. They do not work. They're mutually exclusive. So she is going on the view that these streets will continue to be the corridors onto the freeway. In my world, they are not. And I've always lived in old neighborhoods. And when you live in an old neighborhood, and I don't know who here lives in a very old neighborhood, getting to the freeway is a frustrating experience because cities lock down those access points. You have to circumvent, you have to go around. It's not easy. So in my worldview, the cycle track was taking us to a point where Center Street would not be the option for all that freeway traffic. And I live in the Old Southwest. I represent the Old Southwest. I never take Center Street. Keystone Avenue is the preferred route. So I think that on a discussion on downtown, you can't have Virginia Street separate, and I don't see it, but I would encourage the council to hold tightly on the next points in not see any improvements or make any investments on Virginia Street until we answer the couplets. That downtown will not succeed, in my view. And no, I'm not going to let you talk.
I'd like to answer. I'd like to respond to that.
Yes, please.
I want you to disagree with me.
Yeah.
I disagree with you.
Yeah.
As your city engineer.
Yeah.
For every bike plan, you need a car plan. Our couplets are our car plan.
Yeah, and I'm saying let's have the question
our couplets are our car plan.
And I'm saying let's question.
We do need a place for our vehicles to go. I mean, we are not all bicycles and micromodes. We're not there yet. In probably 30 years, we probably will be, but we're not there yet. So we have to have a car plan.
And the car plan to me is, what's the ADT on Sierra?
I'm not going to get into a discussion about ADTs.
If it's 10,000, for me, a downtown, on your spine of 10,000 should be 2,000, 2,500.
What Koski doesn't mention is the fact that University Way does have a car and bike plan. Remember, council and commissioners voted for it, and it cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to study and develop. It would simply allow cars and bikes to coexist safely on a protected path on just one downtown street. Koski implies that Reno is somehow going to be, quote, all bikes, which is not true. All downtown streets are almost exclusively for cars. Council members wonder why Reno can't have just two streets downtown where students, workers, families, and tourists on bikes can be safe. Koski refuses to get out of the way and let the safety project move forward.
No, it's
we
because
have the
it's human
ability
scale.
to bring our people off of the freeway, of the freeways into our city.
The other thing I think too, it shouldn't be one or the other. Like I think, when we talk about cycle tracks, right?
It's about the network. You and I talked about that. It's all about the network. We can
Carrie,
talk
about that because we had a long discussion, and I think once you explained it to me, it really made a lot of sense. Can you kind of explain?
So in order for us to be successful, we have got to start working on our network plan. How do we build a network in our downtown?
Yeah.
And to me, our Truckee River is our main artery. And we want our network to connect to our Truckee River, because we know how important that is, and we're going to start working on the accessibility around our Truckee River,
Yes.
and from Reno to Sparks to Verdi. But it's all about the connectivity. It's not just about one street. And that's the way we've been looking at this for years, is just like one street at a time.
Right.
Been working with Dale and the RTC, and we went, we've got to concentrate on the network.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of getting derailed here.
No, but you're
that
right.
That is part of the whole micromobility, is because people don't want to just ride on one street.
Right.
They want to be able to get around. And I am passionate about that. I ride a bike. But I'm not going to put myself in jeopardy if if there aren't lower volumes and lower speeds.
That's exactly right. Yes.
While Carrie Koski says she just discovered the idea of the network, these projects have been a part of the regional transportation plan for a long time. The point is that people on bikes need to be safe on all streets, not just Virginia Street.
Yeah, and Madam Mayor.
That makes a lot of sense to me. Hold on before you go. Let me just ask anyone else if they'd like to chime in.
I do.
Go ahead. Councilwoman Evert, going to start with you.
I do want to circle back to the traffic, or the parking and the cars. Thinking about the whole city and not just a specific ward. I know for myself, I would love to go down with these new places set up, but coming from Ward 4, I'm not going to ride a bicycle or a scooter. I'm going to be driving a car, and I'm going to be looking for a parking space, especially if it's date night with my husband, or if I'm going to be going down.
You're not going to put them on the back of your car.
Yeah,
on the back of your bike.
Of my bicycle, right? Or let's get on our scooters and go. And if I'm going to be shopping, right? I'm not going to do my Christmas shopping and then put my bags on my bicycle basket and ride back to Ward 4. That's not to say that I'm opposed to bike lanes. The gentleman that came this morning and gave public comment requesting a bike lane on Virginia Street, we need that. I see those people walking and bicycling when I drive in for council meetings, drive down into Reno. I'm scared for those people. We've had pedestrians hit on Military Road because we don't have bike lanes.
Yeah,
several since I've been on the council. And I know that we're working to get that amended and get those bike lanes in. But it is a real consideration we need to think of, because I do want these places activated. I do want that 70% edges that are vacant to go down. We should have it 0, because every time we have a vacant space, that's a lost opportunity for revenue, for culture, for just community, right? So again, thinking of the whole city, not just one little piece, the downtown. We do need to consider the entire city of Reno, and considering people that are coming from other areas, we do need to be considerate of traffic, cars, parking, and that is my hesitation with putting in these bike lanes in this specific area, potentially impacting parking and taking away turn lanes and making it more difficult, because I'll avoid areas where there's traffic. I don't go there. I'll go another route. I'll go shopping where I can park because it's already a hassle. So that's my only hesitation, and that's why I can say I love everything about this, but that's my hesitation, is being able to access these businesses that I want to see thrive. So that's my recommendation.
Make one other mention, that our parking garages are on our couplets. We don't have access to our parking garages on Virginia Street. We have them on our couplets, University and Center Street. Thank you.
City Engineer Carrie Koski neglected to point out that the protected bike lanes can coexist with parking garage entrances too. They already do on the 5th Street protected path right here in Reno without any issues at all. In a comment from the mayor, she revealed that Carrie Koski had also been presenting two-way cycle tracks as incredibly dangerous, which they are not, as we saw in Washington, D.C.
And you made a point, researching it. To your point, they said it was incredibly dangerous to bike against the traffic.
Yes.
Councilwoman Dewar focused on the history of the University Way cycle track, and you can see how just doing one protected bike path is so difficult for our community, and a hump that we need to get over if we're going to have a safer community.
Take a moment on the bikes, because I do have a thought about this. I participated extensively in the Midtown, and we debated over and over, bikes on Virginia, bikes not. The challenge with parking.
Yeah.
The compromise was this, and people have written in acknowledging what it was.
Yeah.
We said we're going to keep Virginia largely pedestrian and car,
Yes.
and we're going to put the bikes on the next street. So that down there, that's Center, and on the other side, it's Haskell or Forest. And we were going to have them, both those streets go one way. Center to University goes north, the other one comes one way south.
South, yeah.
So we said, let's divide it and let's at least have a big bike throughway that is just one block off Virginia. My gosh, the bikes are gone a mile. They're going to go half a block to get to shopping. So in the area where it gets more congested downtown, my suggestion is not to have the cyclotron two-way, but to continue the bike lane from Center, just a one lane in the same direction as traffic, to your point. You may, because of the intersections, you may want to have it cross over before you hit the river, because at first, or if first goes the wrong way, it's a one way, the other, this way. Before we get on the south side of the river, cross over to Virginia and continue north. So through the downtown part of Virginia, that might be where the bikes are. I don't think that takes away any parking. We barely have any parking. You and I went and looked at it. At the parking on Virginia, most of it's loading zone. You can barely park on Virginia regardless. Yeah. Your idea was to change the loading zones to allow, for example, pedestrians to park for 30 minutes, unload, load up their packages, but not stay long-term parking. Right. Go with the garages for the longer-term parking. So I guess my suggestion is to down by Midtown, have the one way, really accelerated bike lane, really enhanced. Bring it into Virginia in the downtown section so you preserve that on and off ramp thing and those issues that you're identifying. I use Center a lot for driving. I do. It's unfettered. It's easy to drive on. Yeah. It's wide. I mean, there's a lot going for it. I love it. I preferentially go out of my way to drive on Center. Yeah, my colleague may not, but I do. I want to move on. So I do think there's a way forward to have bike lanes on both Center and Virginia and Center to University. Why not drive all the way up to University? If you want to stay on there, go, but at least you're going one direction.
Councilwoman Breckus pointed out that the placemaking study only focused on one street, while everybody realizes that it's all about the entire network, not just one street. And there are existing network studies that support the University Way Center Street cycle track.
I want to say, Ms. Koski came up and said it's about the network. It's about the network. And that's why I did not support the Gale study, because it was just one street. And I referred to the earlier 2016, 2015, I think Traffic Works was the consultant, downtown transportation plan. And we need to think comprehensively about it. And I still think the cycle track is not about the bicycling as much as it is about calming speeds and volumes through downtown. You cannot have high volume, high speed couplets through downtown and have a pedestrian environment of a downtown. It just does not work. Proven. Because one concern I have is we introduce an urban design theme on Virginia Street, and it conflicts with the overall continuity of aesthetic that we have established downtown. Did they? Because then you start to look really sloppy. Mm-hmm. And the wayfaring came in, and you can look really sloppy we've already got 4 generations of sign wayfaring downtown. We don't need a 5th, because that looks like a downtown that's been just very scattershot. You really do need a continuity of your urban design theme in a great city.
You're listening to Bike Life Radio on KWNK 97.7 FM. We are reviewing the intense ongoing debate at the Reno City Council to install just one protected bike path for students from the university to Midtown on University Way.
So the only thing is that I think, because I still would love to see a cycle track if it's done the right way, and I still think it's best on Center. That's just my thought versus Virginia. I think it would be safer. That's just my thought. But I think Carrie brings up some really good issues that we would have to hammer out. Now, Councilwoman Dewar, that's what you were saying, is they would just sort of go the same direction.
Yeah, they would go in the same direction as travel. It's just we would have a very enhanced on Center. I think Center is a beautiful place to have this bicycle, but it doesn't have to be quite as wide to have two-way. And it doesn't have to be as dangerous, but we need it. And I think we need it on Virginia. I think as you get into downtown where it's congested, we need it through multiple streets to the point we've been talking about. Okay. Maybe down by Midtown, it's primarily on Center and primarily on Forest and Haskell, going, the two one-way streets. I mean, but anyway, certainly they can scope this out, like some alternatives. That's all we're asking for. But I think the message to the public is we are committed to biking, and we are committed to biking on Center Street as well as the other streets.
Mm-hmm. Okay, any further questions? All right, I have a motion from Councilwoman Taylor and Ward.
I'll second.
I have a second from Councilwoman Dewar. All those in favor say
Madam
aye.
Mayor, comment?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not going to support the motion. I've been consistent all along that we need to look at the network. Virginia Street, actually, for a downtown street, in terms of the pedestrian environment it creates, works reasonably well. The focus needs to be on the high volume, high speed streets that are on either side of it. This does nothing to do that, doesn't look at the network. So I won't support the continued focus on Virginia Street when it's the best of the downtown streets right now for the pedestrian environment.
So my 1 minute
right.
on the motion is, how do we make it explicit? I just said it, but it's not in the motion, that biking is going to happen on Center and possibly Sierra. How do we make that explicit so people know that if we approve this, it is not to the exclusion of the other? That's what I want to know.
So
The mayor and city council women Naomi Dewar and Jenny Breckus are clearly interested in saying that downtown placemaking should include the network and protected bike path projects on Sierra and Center Streets for safety reasons. But the city attorney Carl Hall and city manager Doug Thornley quickly jump in to tell the council women what they can and can't do.
Madam Mayor,
I expect you're about to say that we're not agendized to...
For what?
For Sierra and Center. That said, what we can say unequivocally here is that approving or accepting this report and approving this phasing plan is not a mutually exclusive
That's what I
decision
wanted to
with
hear.
those decisions.
Thank you.
But we are not agendized to make those particular decisions today.
But you'll bring those back because you've heard from a majority of the council that were very interested in it.
When we have a design that works and a path forward, we will bring it back.
Okay, but let's come up with the timeline. Let's come up with the timeline. Like, we've talked about a cycle track forever and ever and ever and ever. And I would like to see it, like, as soon as possible. And she's sitting here
No, but I mean, in
looking
order
at me
to
like, no
approve
way.
this, and I seconded this motion, I want some assurance that it is not mutually exclusive, that we can work in parallel,
It is
and
not.
that this project on Center, whatever it looks like, is very important to our community.
Kerry Koski, your city engineer, you're absolutely correct. It is not dependent on that. We are going to bring back at the second meeting here in April, the pilot project for the micromobility. And then in May, we are going to be starting our network public outreach. RTC has also got an item agendized for the micromobility. So you, in the next 3 months, you're going to get sick of seeing us.
Well, can you
You really
make
are.
sure the word Center Street and Sierra
Yes, we
is
will
on
look
the
at, we're
agenda
going
so
to
we
look
can
at,
properly
we're going to
discuss
look at
it?
the network connectivity, which is not just Virginia Street, it's all streets.
Okay, well, I want to, would
it's
you
a- it's a
clear
bunch
it
of
with our
streets.
attorneys so that if we want to talk about these ancillary streets, we can talk about
Yep, we
them?
will be.
So
We
that will be separate from this
Item.
placement. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, is that okay? Okay, thank you. You
All right,
answered
so
my
you're
question.
adding that.
No, I'm
Just
not adding
clarifying.
it because it sounds like I can't add it, but
Just
we've given
clarifying.
staff direction.
All right.
And they've gone on record saying that they will work in parallel.
Okay, so I have a motion. I have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
Motion carries.
After all of that discussion, despite assurances from the Reno City Manager Doug Thornley and City Engineer Kerry Koski that the protected path on University Way will continue, the project is still on pause, and there's still no safe protected route for university students to get from UNR to downtown and to Midtown. Hopefully you can see just how difficult this has become compared to other more experienced cities like Washington, D.C. that have installed plenty of projects painlessly. We're gonna move on. Let's take a break for a moment and listen to a short episode of The Wind from Phil Corbett. It's bicycle related.
Corey Maccabee is one of my favorite working artists. And every time he goes for a bike ride, I get an email. For about a year, it was mostly around New York City. But starting at the end of summer, I began to get daily updates. Corey was on a path south, riding his bike from Maine toward Florida. On this ride, Corey would be tracing the migration path of the monarch butterfly.
I'm also going to be stopping and visiting a couple of green burial grounds that have been participating in our project on the way. A few years ago, I followed the monarch butterfly migration path from Chicago down into Michoacan, Mexico, with a German documentary team. So I've already made the trip once. I'm excited to do it again.
The path of the butterfly is not a straight line, but a complex cycle. Within just one migration between the northern parts of our continent and the state of Michoacan in Mexico, 4 generations of butterfly will live, migrate, give birth, and die, while their young continue the journey. In fall, Corey successfully rode his bike from Maine to Florida. Postcards from the Wind are produced by me, Phil Corbett. There is a full-length episode about iButterfly called Red Planet, Blue Planet at thewind.org.
That was Phil Corbett of The Wind, a local guy. Now, Biketopia! I got a call from a guy who has been following the Truckee Meadows Bicycle Alliance on Facebook for some time, and he wants to do an event here in town at the Reno Public Market, bringing all the bike groups together for Art Town. So I met up with him and we had a little chat. Here's Mike McMillan of the Reno Public Market.
What I'd like to do is get as many bicycle coalitions, organizations, groups involved as possible, and that includes like art bikes, bicycle advocates, and have a bicycle day here at Reno Public Market to try to bring awareness to bicycling as a form of transportation. And I thought, we've got a stage, we're going to have bands, we have Art Town in July, it's kind of a perfect marriage, so I thought we'd try to make it all happen here at least one time during July, and maybe more, who knows.
You want to bring all the bike groups together, is that, and that's not a foreign idea to most places, but to us it's like, I was just talking to somebody at Procrastinating Peddlers, and they're like, can we get all the bike groups together? Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, maybe we can. And now you're saying, maybe we can, and let's do that. In other places, bike groups do come together, don't they? Or no? You're from you spent some time in San Francisco. I should give them a little background on it.
I was there for over 20 years, and San Francisco is a very, very bike-friendly town. They've designed city architecture and infrastructure, which I think is something you're trying to do, around the bicycle. They have a route in San Francisco. I don't know if they still do, but they used to. It was called the Wiggle. I don't know if you ever heard of it. The Wiggle. The Wiggle. I think I have heard of that. And it was a path sort of through traffic that prioritized bikes, so that bicyclists would have pretty much the lion's share of the road on this path, and people had to sort of obey the laws around the path. Now, I don't know if they've since changed that, but it was a thing for a long time. When I was living in San Francisco, everybody knew the Wiggle, because if you were in your car, you didn't want to get near the Wiggle and interfere with bike traffic, because they took it very seriously there. And then they had critical mass, if you remember that. Do you remember critical mass? I don't know if they still do that or not, but it was a big deal. They would take over whole sections of the city with bicyclists riding, and you would have people honking and being pissed off or whatever, but it did bring a lot of awareness to bicycle advocacy. Bicycles, by their very nature, as opposed to cars, are somewhat confrontational, and I don't think it's an intentional thing behind it. People are in such a hurry in their cars that anything that impedes their progress, people become different animals behind the wheel. It's almost like people behind their keyboards and people behind their steering wheels are kind of the same animal, you know what I mean? And so anything that impedes their progress, they fly off the handle at. Not everyone, obviously, but a lot of people do. So I think bicycles, by their very nature, being slower than cars, as it were, and needing right of way where, cars are used to just cutting around things, they're sort of viewed as an obstacle. Yeah, I would love to see everybody ride bikes. I see there's a lot of reasons why a lot of people can't. Obviously physical handicap, stuff like that. People can't ride bikes. Be great if they could. On a bike, you get to be more in touch with your surroundings, I think. At least for me, it was.
Yeah, so you've got some history in a town that improved its bicycle infrastructure, and is that something that you'd like to do with this ride in some ways? Yes.
Absolutely. I think I admire what you do. I think there has to be bicycle advocacy everywhere. I don't think there's enough of it here yet, and when I see it pop up, I see a lot of like angry people here that are like, God damn it, impeding my progress, bike lanes, blah, blah, blah. They're taking away traffic downtown. But I think that it's kind of necessary. I mean, there's a whole host of reasons why biking is better than cars if you can pull it off. You know, if you're a person who can make it happen, I think that biking is a better form of transportation than cars.
What would you imagine this would be like? We all show up at the Reno Public Market at a particular time, and then what?
Well, I was either thinking of this as the beginning point or the end point of a ride, and then we would have like bikes on display here. I was thinking that maybe we would have people discussing bicycle advocacy. The thing I find about these bicycle exhibitions, if you want to call it that, is that you'll get one group or another group, and it can either be really haughty and stuffy, or it can be really fun, like you get lowrider bikes or Burning Man bikes or art car bikes kind of stuff, and you bring everybody together. It kind of changes the environment because we're all sort of talking about the same beast here, you know. So that was my idea.
Yeah.
All those groups that you mentioned have one thing in common, and that's that they have to share the road with cars. You know, they all have that in common. Whether it's the guy who's riding because he's a performance bicyclist, or the guy that has an art bike, or a guy that has a Burning Man bike, or a guy that just commutes on his bike. We all have to share the road with cars. And if you've never been on a bike in traffic, it can be a daunting experience. You know, I spent 20 years riding my bike in San Francisco, and I always anticipated that I was going to get doored or thrown from my bike or hit by a car. And it wasn't until I moved back to Reno that I got hit by a car on my bike. San Francisco, as dangerous as it is, I never got hit. I got almost real close to some side view mirrors that came by me on the road, but I never got hit till I got to Reno. Somebody was coming out of the back of their driveway. They weren't looking, and they just came back into my bike and took me right off of it, you know. But it is, I kind of rambled there, but it is, we all have to worry about our surroundings on bikes. No matter what kind of bike you drive or what you do, you have to always have that presence of mind of thinking for everybody else. You know what I mean? Yeah.
So Mike McMillan, you're on Bike Life Radio, 97.7 FM, KWNK, and we're at the Reno Public Market, and you do sound here, don't you?
I do sound, I do audio-video consulting, and I'm helping them with their Art Town program. So Art Town runs from July 1st to July 31st. It's region-wide now. It's not just Reno, it's the whole area. And anybody can do Art Town. If you have an idea for art, you can submit it. Yeah, if you have an idea for art, if you're an artist, you have to find a venue, you have to get insurance, submit your idea. It's pretty much an automatic approval by Art Town, and then you get published in the guide, and people come check out your thing. And that's what we're trying to do here with the Bike Day at Reno Public Market.
Do we want to call it a bike day?
I haven't thought of a name of it yet. And, you kind of caught me off guard with this whole, like, you're suddenly on the radio thing. I'm like, shit, I kind of wanted to go over it with this guy and get some ideas, but, like, now I'm kind of like, here I am. So I don't have a name for it yet, but maybe by the end of this conversation we will.
But you've got a story, right? Like a bike story. You have a favorite bike story?
I could tell you my crash story if you want to hear it.
Sure, yeah, unless you got another favorite one. It's not crash related.
Well, when you ride your bike every day, you get thousands of stories. And I used to ride my bike every day. I've seen fire hydrants get taken out by cars. I've seen cars run into cars. You name it, I've seen it on my bike. I think my ultimate crash story, if you know Nob Hill in San Francisco, I was doing a ride up Nob Hill one night, and I was coming up on a path that I'd never been on before. I came over a hill doing about 30 miles an hour, and when I got to the other side, there was this sudden speed bumps that I didn't realize were there. Wow. And I hit the first speed bump and became airborne. Oh. And I was coming down a very steep hill, laid out on the pavement, multiple tumbles. I kind of came to, and I was just kind of laying there, and I opened my eyes and looked up, and there was a lady going into an apartment across the way, and I was like, help! And she looked at me, scrambled for her keys, opened her door as fast as she could, and went inside and locked it. And I was like, kind of left to myself to kind of limp home on my bike, I think with a sprained ankle and God knows what else. But yeah, that's my San Francisco crash story. No, my bike was thrashed. The handlebars are tweaked. One of the pedals was broken. The rims were tacoed. It was a terrible crash. It was an absolutely terrible crash. I didn't break any bones that I know of. Although years later, a doctor asked me, he said, did you have something traumatic happen to your leg? He said, because you have a fracture all the way through your bone behind your knee and your leg bone. And that's the only thing I can think of. So I may have fractured a bone that night. I don't know. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
All right, Mike McMillan, Reno Public Market. He's on KWNK 97.7 FM and on Bike Life Radio. And we were talking about doing a bike day at the Reno Public Market where we bring out all the different bike groups. And it sounds like a great idea, and this space seems to be conducive to that. So we're going to get started talking about that. Oh, yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
That is Mike McMillan, who sets up bands at the Reno Public Market. It's a hopping new space at Plum in Virginia next to Sprouts. He wants to do a bike event during Art Town. You're listening to KWNK 97.7 FM. That's it for Bike Life Radio. We record out in the world, never in a studio. Bike Life Radio is made possible by KWNK 97.7 FM, owned and operated by the nonprofit bike shop Reno Bike Project. I'm Kai Plascon of bikewasho.org. Right on.
Send respect to all bicycle man all over the world and in the island and all over in the Caribbean of the bicycle man permanent bicycle man of the bicycle man fuck man bicycle man permanent bicycle man of the bicycle man come who are ride bicycle no fat man the slim man and manga man don't get to the this bicycle man to sit down on the